And so what's really interesting for me to interview you is a couple things. One is that a lot of people don't think that healthcare and social media is a good mix. There's too much risk. And it's also my honor to interview someone in the legal profession because a lot of companies are saying, this is too high risk. What if our employees say something that's not the right thing? We give bad advice. So tell me a little bit about how Mayo Clinic decided to approach social media in their community.
Sure. We have some very innovative folks in our marketing department who really pretty early on saw the power of social media. And for us, a lot of it is brand building, and our brand has been built through 100 years. We have one of the most well-known brands in healthcare, and we've built it through 100 years of really not advertising. We've done it through word of mouth. It's people coming to Mayo Clinic, they have a great experience, they talk to other people. And social media really is high-tech word of mouth. So it was kind of a natural fit, and some of our more innovative folks really realized that early on. And even apart from sort of the self-serving goals of building our brand, we're a nonprofit, so our core mission is making people healthier, spreading health information, and social media is just a phenomenal way to do that. And a third reason I think for us is the power of community. Social media is all about community, all about engagement. And so for folks who are dealing with challenging health issues, the power of community is enormous, particularly folks who are dealing with potentially a rare condition, and so there might only be 2 or 3 people in your state who have that condition. It can be very challenging and very isolating. But through the power of social media, you might be able to connect with hundreds of people, thousands of people throughout the world to share your problems, learn solutions. So it can be a very powerful tool.
It makes a whole lot of sense. And when I was working in the agency world, one of the things I took away was the importance of looking at how do we create community, how do we go beyond just a logo. And one of the most powerful things that I've seen are brands that let the consumer or the customer tell the brand story. And so that for some businesses and agencies, that is a new thing, right? Because now we're using word of mouth. But it sounds to me like you guys understood that 100 years ago.
Yeah, we've been very thoughtful about our brand, and that really, again, is how our brand has been built. I mean, a brand really is the sum total of people's perceptions and interactions with your organization. And for us, people have a very personal feeling about our brand. And in some situations, we've helped save lives, we've helped family members, and so people feel that very strong personal connection to us, and it's one of our core assets. And so we're very thoughtful about how we manage that. And again, on social media, that's another way for us to connect with people, not only who are coming to see us because they have health problems, but may need us in the future, or we can impact their lives positively, hopefully, outside of coming to Rochester, Minnesota, or Florida, or Arizona, where we have facilities. We can reach out to folks and help their lives, wherever they may be out all over the world.
So what's interesting is you're integrating both the physical place, right, but you're also integrating the online community. And what's really interesting is that when you do have an illness and the doctors can't figure it out, or you're 1 in a million case, you could feel really depressed, you could feel isolated, and the ability to talk to other people and to share that information. I was just sharing something with my producer, and it's something that she and her daughter and I have something in common, and it's a test that if you take the right test, you get the right information, and then you solve something. And without that information, without being able to share that with people may go undiagnosed, or maybe even end up in a very serious condition without that sharing. So just the idea of, we call those destination communities, a community where people go because they know they can get the right answers. And that can be difficult depending on, how savvy you are with respect to describing your symptoms, or really understanding which doctor to go to.
And that's always a challenge, is how do you vet the information that's out there? And that's one of our great roles, and I think other wonderful providers in healthcare, is to be there and help be a moderating influence on the information that's out there, because a lot of stuff does float around in communities, some good, some bad, and that's sort of the beauty of the internet and of social media, is you'll hear lots of different opinions on things. But being a trusted source of health information, I think, it is where we can provide some real value, and other providers can provide some real value, being part of that community and saying, here's what the evidence that we're seeing shows, and help kind of shape those conversations. Again, social media is a dialogue, it's not a monologue, so it's not us saying things, it's us interacting with folks and helping shape that dialogue.
You heard it here, it's a dialogue. And a lot of brands don't understand that because they come from the old push PR and marketing point of view. And what's really new and what's innovative about what you guys are doing is you're actually having a two-way communication. And the guys who wrote Clue Train and Manifesto in 1999 said that there would be a day and a time where there would be technology that would allow brands and their customers to have a two-way dialogue. And we're here.
We're absolutely here. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we're in one of those industries where that can be a bit more challenging, which I think circles back to your original question, which was healthcare. People assume with privacy issues, HIPAA, that's an absolute bar to doing that. And the answer is no. It has to be done well. It has to be done thoughtfully. It has to be done carefully. And you have to preserve people's privacy. But that doesn't mean there can't be that dialogue. Having a general conversation about, hey, here are some great resources if you're diabetic, here are some great resources to help you manage your condition, is different than, hey doc, it hurts when I do that, what do I do for that? There are lots of laws that will prevent you from actually diagnosing people, and you wouldn't want to do that in a chat room type environment or on a Facebook open group. But again, you can still provide lots of valuable information to folks. So it's about being thoughtful. It's about understanding that there are risks, but managing them sensibly as opposed to throwing up your hands and saying, well, we just won't do that. So
It was interesting. I was watching the morning shows this morning, and there was a young man who was taking, I think it was a Ritalin type drug, and he ended up passing away. And the parents tried to reach out to the doctors. They were unresponsive, and it was a HIPAA situation. And I think that perhaps if he had been part of a community, then the parents and the child may have gotten more help and more support.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think, possibly managing the condition while it was going on, that might have been a source of help to them. But also, I think that's what you find the situations where people are the most frustrated is there's that expectation of a dialogue, and there's that expectation of, if I reach out to you on social media, I want you to the brands that do it well will respond to you and will respond to you immediately. Mm-hmm. The American Expresses, the folks like that, who if you tweet, hey, I had a lousy experience with American Express, you will have someone there immediately saying, how can we help? Let's work through this. And that's what the expectation is. So I think if you react, in the old advertising world or even the old internet world of if somebody says something negative about me, I take it down.
I know. I had a CEO. We captured some tweets and Facebook posts, and they were like, "Oh my God, this is terrible. Take it down." And we said, "Well, one, some of those sites you don't own, so you don't have legal right to take them down, and two, it's going to create distrust in your brand." And they're like, "Really?" And so you can just see kind of their wheels trying to grasp this new idea that they're not in control. But what we find, and we have companies that come to us and say, well, Dr. Nat, we don't want anybody to say something negative about us. And so we say, well, let us show you that people are saying something negative. And if you're not part of the conversation, then you can't shape it or you can't shift it.
No, absolutely. We'd much prefer, let me say this the right way, we'd much prefer, if somebody's going to say something negative, we'd much prefer they say it on our Facebook page rather than their own. I mean, obviously we'd prefer nobody say anything negative, but
Right.
Look, people are going to have interactions that don't go the way everybody wants, and sometimes people will vent, and I'd rather have them venting on our page so we have that ability to interact with them. Now, we're not going to be able to do that typically on our Facebook page. If somebody says, here's a care situation that didn't go well, fix it. We're not going to be able to reveal details of their health information, but we can say, hey, here's a channel to talk to us, let's work through this. And that shows we're a caring brand, and caring is a central linchpin of our brand. So no, I mean, I say the same thing in my presentations, that the worst thing you can do is assume that if you're not on social media, people aren't talking about you, because they are, and you just don't know what they're saying.
And I think I have this saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And we know that people talk about brands and their experiences. Tom Peters told us, one person tells 10 to 20 people, at the water cooler, at a cocktail party. So what's different about social media is two things. One, it's public. And two, it's kind of like cave paintings. It stays there for a very, very long time. It's somewhat permanent.
And that's what causes much of the panic for brand managers and lawyers. And it is, I've been trained in that school too. There is that natural reaction of if it's going to be carved in stone forever, it needs to be shaped and molded, and it should be the exact message we want. And that just isn't the way a dialogue works. It's a give and take. And so you have to resist that natural urge. And I've counseled often, it's there, leave it. And we've learned that you will generate far more negative publicity from that urge to yank things down than to say either we made a mistake or let's work through this and let people know you care.
And what I find is if you do a really good job of building brand advocates, that if someone has a negative experience with the brand, I was coaching somebody and they said, oh, someone just posted horrible things on our Facebook page. Dr. Nat, what do we do? And I said, well, sit on your hands and don't do anything. She's like, you usually give me fabulous advice and this is stupid. This is the dumbest thing you've ever said. I said, wait. And then she started to see the brand advocates start to post and say, oh, I had a similar problem, or maybe you're misinterpreting this, or this brand really does care. Here's how you reach out to them. And she was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. And I said, Ashley, what you didn't know is how much trust you created and how many brand ambassadors love this brand.
That's one of the reasons we're on social media, is we have many people who have that strong personal connection with our brand, both our employees and our patients and other folks have interacted with us. And we have found that on our Facebook page, for example, if someone posts something negative, particularly something that maybe is unfounded, we find that people will jump into the fray before we even have the chance to, and say, you know, that's not the Mayo Clinic we know. We would be really surprised if that happened. So that's absolutely true. Trust your brand. If you're doing things right in the brand world, the folks who have that personal connection will come out and support you.
So tell me, what do you see about the future of compliance? So one of the things that we're doing a lot with companies and brands is helping them, one, establish a social media policy, and two, we see the trend towards people going towards having every single employee, kind of like sexual harassment type of training, is just brand awareness 101. You represent a brand on and off time, that what you say and do, whether it's in email, phone, or in social media, represents not only you as a person or personal brand, but also our larger brand. So what are you seeing in terms of guiding companies with respect to policy? What's the best role for attorneys to be involved? Because it's very important to protect the brand, right? But also, like you said, you don't want to have them be so involved that every single tweet or every single post has to be vetted, which means that you're not really responding in real time.
Important part is have a social media policy. Brand training has been something we've done for years and years and years. Our brand is important. I would hope most other folks with large, well-known brands are thinking that too, and that's part of your new employee orientation. What's somewhat new for us is we're starting to include social media type materials in our new employee orientation, our yearly compliance training, and I think that's what folks should be thinking about doing. The brand piece is probably something you're already doing. The nuance to how that plays out in the social media space is important for people to understand. I think, you know, ultimately probably the most important thing you want your employees to do is to take those 2 or 3 seconds before they hit post to think. You know, we've come to this generation of livecasters where there really is this expectation that everything that happens to you will get shared immediately on all of your networks. And you know, everybody that's entering the workforce now has, for most of their lives, lived on Facebook. And so
I know I was talking to our producer Arlene's daughter, and we were talking about cell phones, and I said, you know, I'm just really pretty recent to texting. And she looked at me like I had 3 heads. She was, really?
Yeah.
Really? And I said, yeah, there was a time when I had a phone that didn't have text. And she was just flabbergasted. And then I have a story about my nephew. We're at Thanksgiving at my sister's. I'm in the basement. He's upstairs. And he sends me a text and he says, Aunt Nettie, dinner's ready. I walk upstairs and I go, Nick, why did you text me that dinner was ready? Why didn't you just like yell down the stairs or come talk to me? He goes, Aunt Nettie, if I can text, why would I do that? I was like, wow.
Yeah, no, I've had situations where my kids are texting each other in the car, and I'm looking in the rearview mirror saying, are you really texting each other in the same vehicle that you're in? So, yeah, it's a very different world. I mean, people really, not only their concept of who they share their information with, but who is really a friend is very different. You know, when I was a teenager, I had the 20 friends who were people that I knew in a flesh and blood context. You know, now a friend is someone that I have an electronic relationship with, and people have hundreds of those relationships. So that potential to interact and impact large numbers of people is there for virtually everybody. And so that's all the more important for people to think, spend that 2 or 3 seconds of, hey, if I'm a nurse and I'm talking about something that happened during my day, which may be wonderful, and I may be saying something positive, hey, I delivered, you know, a baby today and I love my job. But if that's on Facebook and it's date and time stamped and it's a small community, that now may be identifiable and that may be a privacy violation. So you need to get people to take those 2 or 3 seconds to say, is that appropriate? And again, it's not to say don't do it, it's to say be thoughtful about doing it, and that can be a challenge.
That makes sense. And what do you see about creating social media policy? How do you add that? And what are some, maybe a couple tips for companies when they're creating policy and they're training their employees?
I think the key is get the right stakeholders in the room, and then typically that's going to include your legal department, that's going to include HR, that's going to include your social media staff if you have them, or your marketing staff. And there needs to be some good give and take, because I think you may start on one end of the spectrum, very risk averse, but I think you want to get all the folks in the room thinking through the hard issues. There are a lot of things to think about, a lot of references to existing policies. That frankly the issue that we hear the most is somebody's on Facebook when they're supposed to be working. That's been around since there were crossword puzzles. I mean, it's no different.
And my nephew, the one that texted me, he said, Aunt Nettie, I was on Facebook and Twitter today during the day. He's in Michigan, I'm in California. And he said, are you going to get in trouble for all that tweeting? And I said, well, no, actually, that's my job. And he said, how can I get that job? That's so cool. So I told him, I said, well, you need to get A's in math and science.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, no, I think the thing is to be thoughtful about those things. I think what you want is to make sure there are no surprises for you or your employees about what your expectations are. I would hope most companies would not view this as we need to block this, as we talked about. That's somewhat of an ostrich with your head in the sand. You can block social, you cannot be on social media. People are still going to talk about your brand. You can block social media in your organization. That doesn't mean people are not going to be on social media during the workday. They all have iPhones, they all have BlackBerries, and so they're going to be on Facebook. So the reality is I think you're much better off teaching people how to use it sensibly, effectively, and manage the risks of that and embrace it rather than run from it or try to stem the tide.
How long is your social media training that you do with new onboarding, and then I guess you have some sort of compliance training?
We do. It's still a relatively small piece of both. It's something we're working on beefing up and would like to be more robust as we move forward. I think for us one of the challenging issues is not only dealing with privacy but professionalism. You may have seen there was a story I think it was yesterday, that broke in Fox News, where there was a physician, an OBGYN physician, who had complained about a patient who had missed appointments, and she made kind of a snarky response along the lines of, well, if she can miss appointments, maybe I can miss the delivery. And she really, was pilloried, and this became national news. Because there was no privacy violation there, or at least from what I've seen, but it was that issue of you're in one of those professions like the law, like medicine, where people hold you to a somewhat higher standard. So for us, frankly, as big an issue as privacy is professionalism and how we want people to perceive their caregivers. And so, that's part of our culture, and so that's something we work through both in the bricks and mortar world and really reinforce with folks that that's something online, that doesn't change.
Right, and that makes sense, and I know that people at the base of it, we're all people. We get frustrated, whether we're doctors, nurses, attorneys, or social media consultants, and sometimes we see people do things that we know are contrary, and so part of our professional upbringing has been, well, you can give advice, but you can't, if someone's not going to take the advice, the best thing to do is just let them do what they're going to do, but you can't post or say something negative about them.
And that gets back to taking that 2 to 3 seconds to think. I think if that physician had she was probably frustrated, as you said.
She probably really cared about her patient.
Absolutely.
And she was like, look, you're pregnant, you need to come to your appointments. I can't help you if you're not helping yourself.
Right. But I think, again, taking that time and saying, okay, is this really the right forum where thousands of people are going to see that, my name is on it, is that how I want to represent myself and my organization? She probably would have done it differently. So again, it's about getting people to take that time to think.
Tell me a little bit about your community and let's say people post advice or give advice. How do you vet the content, and what's your process to make sure that things stay on track?
Every area where we're in, we certainly have physicians who are resources for us, and so we monitor our Facebook page, we monitor, our @mentions on Twitter. We also do have a social media community called Connect, which we're actually, it's our own community that we moderate, and so we have folks moderating that, and they have resource to Mayo Clinic physicians who, they're all pretty well trained in health information, and so they sort of have a sense of this sounds like there may be issues with that. And so we'll typically have a physician come in and respond and say, here, evidence will show this, or maybe there isn't support for that. So.
Have you done any return on investment? Because it sounds like you have a pretty good staff, you have doctors' time involved. Is that something that you're looking at calculating, or does the brand just feel like it's really important?
We got in so early on, and we've really tried to sort of avoid, you and I were talking earlier, I know there's a lot of support for ROI. I think we've tended to take the view the ROI analysis can be a bit of a trap. I mean, it really is, in my view, a sea change in communications.
Yes.
And it's like the telephone, it's like the computer. It needs to be there, and you need to be there. And so we've, what's the ROI of using a telephone in your business?
Well, today we would think that's crazy, and that's the paradigm shift. So kind of the note to our viewers is that someday social media will be as ubiquitous as the phone is.
Mm-hmm. And I think for us, we pretty early on viewed that as that would be the way it was. And so we...
Very, very futuristic thinking.
Well, we've had some early successes. I mean, we became one of the leaders, I think, in healthcare social media, and saw how that was building our brand. And I've had some interesting conversations with folks in our C-suite who I would have thought even, we've been involved in social media for a number of years now, and I would have thought would still be somewhat skeptical, but who've said to me, boy, initially I was skeptical, but
Right.
I've seen how it builds our brand. I've seen people come in the door because of interactions they've had with social media, and we're believers. So we've been lucky in that regard. And I think we have some very insightful leaders, too.
Yeah. Well, I think it takes a village, right? So it takes smart people like you to help educate and reduce the fears. So I think your role is really important because you clearly understand the legal implications, and supporting the CEOs and shifting their mindset, and helping the whole organization really do this and do it in a way that's really building everybody's future is really amazing.
Well, thanks. I mean, for us, it's not about, whether you do it, it's about how you do it. It's all about managing risks and being sensible.
Makes sense. Well, there you have it, Mayo Clinic.